Welcome back to It's Not Normal, the podcast, episode 28. In this week's episode, we're talking about spontaneity and self-love, among other things. It's currently Thursday morning, and the podcast, this episode that we're shooting right now, comes out in about 8 hours. And this is the closest that we've ever cut it. But I made a commitment to myself and to you that every Thursday there would be a new podcast episode. And I intend to stick to that, even if it isn't always bright and early Thursday morning, 10 a.m. The reason that I'm shooting this right now, today, is because yesterday, Brandon and I went for a hike. Tuesday night, we were talking about hiking for whatever reason, and we looked at the weather for the following day, and it said sunny and 80 degrees. And it was the first 80-degree day that we've had, and we haven't hiked at all this spring, and we both just really wanted to do it. It felt like the right thing to do. And so I knew that we had to shoot this episode, but we did it anyway. I think sometimes you just have to give in to life's timing and the things that feel right in the moment, and feel comfortable enough that everything else will fall into place afterwards. So the hike itself was great, but the drive to get there took a little bit longer than anticipated. The last 3 miles leading to the trailhead was an unpaved road with rocks in the middle of the road and giant puddles and crater-sized holes that we had to navigate. It felt like we went off-roading unintentionally. And so the trip as a whole took a little bit longer than we anticipated. And by the time we got home, we were both just so exhausted. And even still, I contemplated shooting the episode at like midnight last night. But I'm really excited to talk about this topic, and I didn't want to shortchange it. I wanted to be sure that I was in the right headspace, that I could give this topic the time and attention that it needed, and that you deserve as listeners listening to me talk about this. And, you know, I was really proud of myself because there was definitely a time in my life where making the decision to not just push through and shoot the podcast that night and stay up however late I had to make sure that it was scheduled and posted at 10 a.m. on Thursday, because that's what I said. It would have really bothered me. I think it would have stressed me out and made me feel anxious and kind of impacted the way that I feel about myself. Maybe I would have felt a little bit like a failure. I would have, not felt too thrilled about the podcast as a whole. But I think it's really important to be in the right headspace when we're having these kinds of conversations. And I was really proud of myself for feeling comfortable enough to recognize that, to believe that, and to feel okay in making that decision. And so here we are Thursday morning, and we're feeling good. I think, this is a great opportunity, this experience as a whole, just kind of delaying this a little bit, to remind not only you, but also myself that it's okay to not always get everything done in the time that you want to or that you plan to. Sometimes you have to rework your schedule, and that's completely okay. That's not a reflection of who you are as a person. That doesn't mean that you just have to not do this thing at all anymore because you missed the date or you missed the time. It's all okay. Now, spontaneity. This hiking trip was a bit spontaneous, and spontaneity is something that at times has been challenging for me, but I think I'm always willing to push through the discomfort that spontaneity sometimes causes me, because I believe that it's important to embrace change and to allow space in your day, in your schedule, for things to happen that you might not have anticipated. I think it keeps you on your toes, it keeps life interesting, and sometimes you just have to trust the timing of things. And I think, when you find yourself in those situations where maybe you end up in a place that you never would have imagined at the start of your day, or your day takes a turn, and instead of fighting against it, you really embrace it, I think those, more often than not, are the most memorable experiences that we have in life. And I know for me, in my personal life, the decisions that I've made when I've been in that headspace and really kind of leaned into that idea, those have been some of the best and the root of some of the most positive experiences in my life. And that's what life is, right? It's a collection of moments and experiences, and we get to decide what those are. We have that power to one extent or another. That being said, I get so caught up in the things that I feel like I have to do or I should be doing that I feel a sense of responsibility to get those things done before I allow myself to do anything else, especially if it involves spending a significant chunk of my time, of my day as a whole, or spending money. And that can be as simple as filling up my tank because it's a far drive wherever it is that I'm going. All of these things contribute to the guilt that I feel when I do something that I want to do. All the while, I know that there are things that I have to do that I haven't done yet, if that makes sense. I'm working on it. I'm not entirely there, but we're taking the steps. We're getting there. And I think part of trying to figure out why I feel this way and kind of letting go of that is coming to terms with this idea that I don't think there will ever be a time in my life when I feel completely content and accomplished. I don't think I will ever have taken care of all of my responsibilities and checked every single thing off of my to-do list so that now I'm just free to do whatever it is that I want without any guilt or responsibility. I don't think that's realistic. I think there are always going to be things that I want to get done. There are always going to be things that I need to get done. There are responsibilities that I will have. I'm a human being. I'm an adult. It's all part of it. And so I'm starting to realize that I have to be the one to free myself of that guilt. I have to figure out what balance in my life looks and feels like for me, and then unapologetically allow myself to do the things that feel right. And that's a process because I'm still figuring out who I am, what I like and what I don't like. I'm still learning how to trust myself and my decisions and my intuition. It's not something that happens overnight. I think it takes a lot of time and practice, especially if you grew up not prioritizing those things. It's really hard to kind of look inward and to not hold yourself to these imagined expectations that we think other people have for us, and instead define what's important to us in our own lives and to feel confident making those decisions and executing those ideas. And that all kind of ties into what really inspired this week's episode. I had a completely different topic planned out, not gonna lie, but a couple of nights ago, I had a bit of a moment and I felt really compelled to share it with you. It felt like a breakthrough. And I use that word, breakthrough, to describe, at least in my personal life, to describe an experience where I all of a sudden become aware of something. I look at something through a different lens, maybe in a new light, that offers me a bit of clarity in defining myself and my experience and better understanding that. Maybe something that at one point in my life caused me a lot of stress and anxiety just doesn't anymore. All the while being self-aware enough to understand and I guess realize that this is happening. Taking note of this feeling as you're feeling it. I guess that also kind of comes into play here. And I've had quite a few of these breakthrough type moments since moving out of my parents' house, even before I started to really dive into mental health and learning more about emotional immaturity and the long-term impacts that can have on you. I remember, having some of those moments and just feeling a lot more confident, like I was more capable, like I had a better sort of well-rounded understanding of who I am and my thoughts and my emotions. And these moments always feel kind of like epiphanies. I think they always happen relatively suddenly, where maybe it's a conversation or an experience or just a thought that pops into your head. And it's such a great feeling because I feel like I've healed a part of myself when I experience this. It's like I'm recognizing the end of a chapter And now that I'm here, I can look back on it. I'm no longer in the thick of it where I don't fully understand what this is or where it comes from or how to heal it. I have this changed perspective. And now it's like I can close that portion of my life that was maybe really difficult, that at one point maybe I didn't even know was there, or I didn't have the tools to process, and use what I've learned to now move forward. I can put those things into practice in a healthy way, and this negative thing will no longer dominate as much of my thought process as it once did. And that might be consciously or subconsciously. What we're talking about today, this sort of breakthrough moment, I think it was very subconscious. It was affecting me on a subconscious level. And so Tuesday night, I'm standing in my bathroom and I'm looking at myself in the mirror. And Tuesday, all day, I had my hair up in a ponytail. And that was the first day in probably 4 years that I was actually able to put all of my hair up into a ponytail, and it stayed the whole day, which might not sound like a big deal, but I would say for at least 98% of my time in elementary school, from, ages 4 to 13, my hair was in a ponytail. I was such a tomboy. I was like uncomfortable having my hair in my face. I didn't know what to do with it. And so I would tie it back daily. And I haven't been able to do that in the last 4 years, ever since I cut it. And so I was just looking at myself and I felt really cute and I felt really happy. And rather than just dismissing it and kind of moving on from that moment like it was no big deal, I allowed myself to just sit in that moment and to show myself love in a way that I didn't even realize I wasn't doing until that night. I think I've entered the forgiveness stage of healing. And I don't know, healing is not a linear journey by any means. It is such an individual process, and there aren't really any concrete steps to follow. I think it's going to take you on whatever path necessary to get you to where you want to be. And it's really impossible to predict all of the different emotions or thoughts or experiences that you might encounter along the way. It's very much just kind of buckle up and go for the ride. And I don't want to say hope for the best, but it's like once you're in it, you're really in it. And it can be really hard sometimes it can be inconvenient, it can be stressful, it can be overwhelming, isolating, all of these different things. But that is what healing is for me. Anyway, I think is facing these things as they come. It's not denying the existence of them. It's not being scared of them. It's staring them in the face and making a concerted effort to understand them so that you can better yourself as a person. And so the other night, I feel like I realized that for a long time, for these last 5 years, part of me has been made to feel like I need to be forgiven based on my parents' reactions to me and the decisions that I've made. I don't know what my parents' true feelings are beyond what they've said to me or shown me. I feel judged by them and rejected by them, though, for who I am as a person, for my preferences, for the things that I consider to be important in my life and the way that I want to live my life, my values. And I think that their disapproval has made its way into my mind, and it's affected the way that I think, the way that I view myself and talk to myself. I think maybe even sometimes the way that I carry myself. And I don't think I realized until Tuesday how much my ability to love myself and to show myself kindness and compassion and all of these things was rooted in my parents' approval. Losing that, especially as someone who thrived on approval throughout my childhood, I was an overachieving student. I was always taught to respect authority, whether that was teachers or other adults in my life. I would always do what I was told. And when I received that approval and that positive reassurance, you got 100 on a test, you won this award, you made the team, those were all things that informed how I felt about myself as a person. I thought that when I received approval from authority figures in my life, that meant that I was a good person, that I was on the right path, that I was doing the right thing. That, coupled with being conditioned to believe that love and support were transactional, where if I didn't fulfill my duties, if I didn't come to the aid of my parent during a disagreement, if I didn't corroborate a lie during an argument for them, that in some way was a reflection of me as a person. I think when you're raised by an emotionally immature parent, there's a lack of intrinsic value, I think, that you can feel where you as a person aren't enough. You have to do something to earn approval and love and affection. And the more you do those things, at least for me, I think the better person I felt like. If that makes sense. I felt like I was a good person when I was doing what I was told and when I was doing it well, and in turn receiving approval from those people in my life. And so losing the approval of my parents, I think, made me feel ashamed in some ways. And I think it prompted me subconsciously, really, to distance myself from parts of me that feel really true, that I love, that I'm proud of, that looking back are not negatives. They don't make me a bad person. They simply don't align with what my parents want. And so I went to great lengths, as I'm sure many of you have also, to win the approval of my parents or my teachers or any other authority figure in my life. And losing that as a result of making decisions that have had such a significant and positive impact on my mental health is so confusing. I remember talking with my parents and posing the question, if I was in an unhealthy relationship with an emotionally abusive partner and they were saying and doing all of these things to me and they wouldn't listen to me and they wouldn't change, would you want me to stay in that relationship? Do I deserve to be treated that way? And so I moved out, and that changed my life. Removing myself from an unhealthy environment allowed me the time and space to start to get to know myself and to start to heal. And so that was a really positive change, I would say. That was a decision that took a lot of strength and confidence and faith. And I'm really proud of myself for doing that. But I know that if I were to talk to my parents about that, they wouldn't have the same view of that I do. And so when you lose the approval and the support of your parents as a result of making a decision that really positively impacts so many other aspects of your life, it's a whirlwind of emotions that I think impacts you in ways that you might not even suspect. And so, the other night after feeling all of this, my thoughts were just flooded with just unapologetic self-love. I was writing in my journal, and everything that I was thinking and feeling, I was like, I can love myself. I should be confident. I'm a good person. And, it wasn't in a cocky or self-centered way, but I was really feeling like I should be about me. I should love the person that I am, and I'm allowed to be confident in who I am and the decisions that I make and the way that I choose to live my life. And it was such a moment. It was such a realization that I didn't even realize that for so long, some of these really small decisions that I would make throughout a day, that, I would do something or I would say something or I would choose to wear something and I would feel guilt or shame or maybe like I shouldn't be doing this, even though it's really true to me. I think it informed a lot of that for me without me even realizing it. And now that I've kind of had this epiphany about this aspect of my life and the way that I feel about myself, it's so clear where a lot of those feelings were coming from. I feel like I can trace them back to specific instances that had more of an impact on me than I knew at the time, and that I knew until a couple nights ago. It's kind of like a voice inside my head, but it's not my own voice. It's my parents' voice. And I've experienced that in the past, but in different ways, where I guess I would say or do something that I knew they wouldn't agree with. And it was very obvious where that negativity was coming from in my own inner monologue. But I think what was so unique about this experience that I had a couple of nights ago was that it unlocked these much more subconscious feelings that I thought were actually mine, or maybe I just hadn't traced back. I didn't fully understand where they came from. And so I felt like there was a reason that I should be questioning these feelings or these thoughts or these decisions. But now understanding that my negativity comes from maybe a fear of not gaining my parents' approval, now I feel like I can actually let that negativity go, because I'm not living my life for my parents. I'm living my life for me. And regardless of how they might have negatively reacted to me taking really bold, confident, sometimes even scary steps forward in my own personal life to better myself and my future and the experience of the people around me that I care about, I know that it was the right thing to do. And I know that their disapproval comes from losing control, not being able to manipulate me anymore. Maybe thinking that I was one thing, but as I got older and I started to gain a little bit of perspective, realizing that I'm not just a pawn, that I'm my own person, and that I won't always be under their thumb, that there's going to come a day when I will embrace my individuality and independence, and I'm going to start making decisions for myself, and that is completely okay. And then after all of this, I'm having all of these thoughts and feelings. I sit down to check Instagram one more time before I go to bed. And the first thing that comes up on my feed is a text post that said, "The biggest part of who I am is who I refuse to become." And that hit me. Let me tell you, a lot of people have reached out to me and said that I've been able to put words to an emotion or a thought or a feeling that they haven't been able to describe. And this post did that for me. It so accurately and succinctly described this much larger feeling that has, in a lot of ways, been the catalyst for my healing journey. I remember a lot of different experiences when I was younger, whether it was a really bad blow up or a stressful experience, really tense, something just objectively really negative, looking for a silver lining, always trying to find a silver lining. And I remember more often than not coming back to this idea that, well, at least I know what not to do. At least I know when I grow up, I'm never going to do this because this doesn't feel good. If I have kids, I will never involve them in that. I feel like that was kind of what I would come back to a lot of the time to try to make sense of what had just happened, because maybe on some level I knew that it wasn't normal. I just knew that it didn't feel good and that I didn't want it to happen. And so I had to find some kind of reasoning or justification as to why it was happening and why it was happening to me. And so I think more often than not, that was kind of my peace of mind where, okay, I know I'm not going to do this when I'm older because this doesn't feel good. I don't like this. At least I know what not to do. It makes me think of that movie 13 Going on 30, when Jenna, when she's young, she invites this group of mean girls over to her house for her birthday party because she just so badly wants to be accepted by them. But they're really not nice to Maddie. And Maddie is such a kind kid, and he's a real friend to Jenna. I'm sorry if you haven't watched this movie. If you haven't, you should, though, because it's amazing. Jennifer Garner, love you. Anyway, I thought to myself that, in that experience, if her behavior, if Jenna's behavior was approved of by this group of mean girls that she so badly wanted acceptance from, that probably meant that she was doing the wrong thing. Because she was being mean to Maddie. She was being mean to a person who really cared about her and had her best interest in mind. And when you flip the script and, you make it to the end of the movie and, spoiler alert, you see that she doesn't care to have their approval. They disapprove of what she's doing because she's all about Maddie and she doesn't care if they think that she's cool or not. That is when she's doing the right thing for herself and for the people in her life that actually care about her. And so it all kind of falls in line with everything that we've been talking about in this week's episode. Maybe my parents' disapproval is a good thing. Maybe that means that I'm on the right path. And that's kind of where my head is at right now. So that is where I'll leave you for this week's episode of It's Not Normal. I will be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, if you enjoyed what we talked about this week, please be sure to like this video, leave us a comment, or if you're listening on Spotify, be sure to leave us a rating. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll be back next week with another episode of It's Not Normal, the podcast.